So the genesis of this whole project was a conversation that Samantha and I had several months ago, just talking about the Heritage Society and the fact that its makeup is changing and it's becoming a much more intergenerational group of people. Um, and then we thought, wouldn't it be cool to have conversations between those generations, some of our younger Heritage Society members and older Heritage Society members, particularly people who've been supporting this organization for decades. And so we are going to have a number of pairings of people, intergenerational pairings, talking about the trust and why they support it and why they care about it. And as a way of prompting those conversations a little bit, we thought it would be good to have the staff sit down and talk amongst ourselves about the work that we do and why we do it. Because we were just joking around about it's not necessarily the high salaries, right? But it's the work that we do that keeps us coming back. So. That's what I don't have a direction that I want this conversation to go in this morning. I would really like just to hear people's thoughts about this organization and why it feels important to do the things that we do and what makes people, presuming that you do get up out of bed in the morning most of the time wanting to come to work. What's the motivation? We have changed a lot in the last 4 or 5 years because of the work of increasing numbers of individuals on the staff. So
I'll start, which is no big surprise, I'm sure. Growing up here, I really never had an appreciation for what it was like to live in a place like this that had so many just public spaces, natural resources. I sort of grew up with the evolution of the trust. The trust was formed when I was 5. So I was completely unaware of it until I was really in my late 20s. And it wasn't until I had left for college and gone to a place that was very different from here, the Midwest, that I had this like really startling realization that not every place is like this, and not every kid grows up with a camp on a pond or a local beach where you can go get in the ocean or trails up the local mountain, and that those places are really hard to find in other areas of the country, and they're much more I guess sort of like manufactured by humans, like those outdoor spaces. You have like sort of public pools, water parks, any trails that existed where we were in East Lansing were all asphalt and full of people with very few trees around you at all. It was like right in the direct sun all the time. And it was not convenient to get to them, and it wasn't necessarily pleasant to be on them. You didn't get the same benefits as you get by being in the woods here. And so when my husband and I came back, it was so striking to me, like what we had here. It was like a veil was lifted and I could see it for the first time. And I thought it was so interesting that as a kid, I never appreciated it, never really realized what we had. And so I'm really excited to be a part of an organization that's working hard to help the kids who are growing up here now know what they have, and to be able to take advantage of what they have and enjoy it while they're here, and hope that maybe it's a part of their decision to come back and be here. There are more and more people of my generation who went off to big cities, went off to other areas of the country and the world, who are now, especially after this pandemic, like moving back here, because this feels like a really good place to raise a family and to live. It's a calmer way of life. It feels safe here. And I just think, I think that's really powerful and that's really interesting. And I feel like this organization is a huge part of that. and how this organization has helped like shape this peninsula and protect some of these places that are so important. And these folks know those places are here and are always going to be here because an organization that holds them in perpetuity is taking care of them. And I just think it's exciting to be a part of that work instead of looking back and seeing everything gone like a lot of people see, like in Long Island and places like that. You know, Terry Moulton, our board member, he looks back at places he used to go in his youth and they're gone. They're just absolutely gone, built up, decimated. And it's really sad for him. I'm glad that we don't have to have that here and that we can look back and look at the really good job this organization has done and the direction that we're going in the future, and know that we're just going to keep building on it. So that's one thing that excites me.
I can jump in. Growing up, living in inner city central Illinois, my parents always took me to national parks whenever we traveled, and just the love of outdoors was something that was instilled in me in a fairly early age. And then life goes on, and you go to the corporate scene and environmental work, and at least my path was, and the reprieve was to get outside and again visit those national parks. We didn't really have land trusts in central Illinois when I was growing up. Trails were made out your back door, cross the railroad tracks and go into the woods near the cemetery. But I gravitated towards getting outside and just experiencing what we could. And when my wife and I moved here to Maine, 17 years ago, we just happened to land in this community, and it was great to explore and see all that the local trusts, both Blue Hill and the surrounding land trusts, had to offer on recreational activities and just nature. And it's been a journey, and I'm glad that I landed here because most of the group here has that mentor and education, I guess, really not really need, but it's all fulfilling for us that we like to impart things on others, whether it's through outreach events, whether through trail building, whether it's through different walks and talks, and it's awesome that we have developed an internship program that I really love during the summer, that brings in new kids to teach them about what we all have here, back to the community aspect. And it blossomed beyond this local community. It's the country, it's the it's the continent, it's the earth, that they can take the skills and ideals that they've learned here in this just small community and expand the world and make it better for others. And it gives me satisfaction that I can play a small part of that. So.
I think like you, I grew up in an area outside of the state that that didn't have a lot of open spaces, and when we went on vacation was an opportunity to go to these open spaces, and it wasn't really, and we didn't really, at least my family didn't go to these places with the intent of exploring nature. We'd go to beaches, we'd go to Acadia National Park, but we didn't do a lot of hiking, we didn't do a lot of walking. So that whole concept of enjoying nature, getting out in nature, and just like being with nature, that was a concept that was completely foreign to me. And I love the fact that now that I live here, now that I have a family that I've raised here, I feel like I've been able to kind of instill that concept that, nature isn't something that you go to just on vacation, and it's something that you can go and experience. You don't have to go and do something exciting and fun. You can just sit and you can be with nature, and that is fulfilling. And I think that the people who live here have that opportunity, and whether or not that's clear to them, it may not be clear to them. Chrissy, you said yourself that you grew up here and didn't really understand like the benefits of living here. And I think the work we do is showing, you know, families the benefits that nature has to provide, you know, through various events that we have. You know, it might not be that everyone experiences our events and then goes out and decides that they're going to, you know, take everything, put it on their back and hike out miles and miles and have that epic hiking and camping experience that people have in the great North Woods. But I feel like they're gonna find something a little bit more fulfilling than what I feel like I had growing up. And so I just, you know, really welcome the work we do here as a result of that.
I guess the similar, speaking to what you said, I kind of had the opposite end of that. Growing up in Long Island in a really developed place, I always was in the outdoors, but it was really an effort. It was always required to drive, it required paying money, it was really, I got outside all the time, but I was a weirdo, and like it was really hard to access those resources. And I feel like here, somewhat, I guess along the lines of what Terry said, is that I see here what my mother experienced in Long Island 60 years ago, 50 years ago, and to get into the community and have them recognize how important it is for themselves, and, you know, for those kids to experience that and to have those values, and also for them to hopefully realize that if we don't actively do something about this, the thing that happened on Long Island or anywhere else in this country could easily happen here. Right. And to some extent after COVID, you know, you can see that speeding up a little bit, and how these wild, protected, beautiful places, parts of Maine that we just think of as like, oh, it'll be fine forever and it just is how it is. It requires an active like participation and intervention from the local community and other groups, and like the work that the trust does is like recognizing that we have to be actively working to protect this land, and that all of the sort of economic and social structures that kept Maine this big wide open place for a long time, those are not necessarily there anymore, you know, and some of them aren't, and they're changing and growing, and the way our economy works has changed, and there's so many more pressures now, you know, from development to climate change to a million different things that, you know, this trust I think is like really poised well to be addressing those issues, like, you know, doing the work that the trust has always done, protecting land, integrating all of the community aspects and education, and looking at resource use and trying to get the community to look at different ways of being on the land, pulling all that together. Like, this trust is really doing that important work that both educates the public and also, you know, protects the land and integrates just living on the land in a really like willful way, like purposefully choosing to protect this place and make the most of it, and not just sort of let what happens here. And so I think, I mean, that's a lot of why I really appreciate this organization, what it's doing, and I think it could be a great model for other places, a model for how to protect land but keep that land as a community resource, and not, you know, isolated as something that people can't benefit from in other ways. So I think that's what I really, you know, something I love about this organization and how it's working and what it's doing.
Yeah, the community aspect for me is super exciting, because I feel like more and more this organization is becoming more encompassing of the community, and like what do we consider our community when we are thinking about the projects that we're doing, when we're thinking about like our strategic plan and where we want to go in the future. We're not just thinking about the people who just sort of are supporting our work and our rah conservation. We're really thinking about everybody in the community, even people who can't access the typical trail. And like, so we want to create spaces where they can get out and enjoy these places. We're thinking about farmers. We're thinking about the fisheries. We're thinking about the, you know, the sportsmen, the artists, we're thinking about everybody who lives here. And I feel like that's a shift in conservation. It's exciting.
It is, and we're rethinking community. We're also rethinking land in a pretty serious way. for a long time in this country, a majority of people had a pretty intimate relationship with land. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And one of the things that happened over the course of the 20th century is that a lot of people gave up that direct connection between their community and the land that they live on. One of the things that got reclaimed first by people was recreation, going out and going to national parks, going to the public trails and things like that. But I think we are becoming more and more aware, I think nationally, that a relationship with land is deeper than that too. I think that's one of the other lessons of the pandemic, is that globalization is good at some level, but it's a very tenuous and delicate thing sometimes, and having a connection with your local landscape is primary, or it should be primary. And so it's not just a matter of protecting land to go out and walk on. It's a matter of protecting land for a whole lot of other values, and that gets into the fisheries, into the farming, and forest management and things like that. And I feel like what we're working on here really is reintegrating land back into, communities back into the land, and the idea of land, back into our idea of what community is. And coming up with something deeper, and really something much more local, healthy at a local scale. I guess that for me is, if we're ultimately after a healthy biosphere, right, a healthy planet, you can't have that without healthy ecosystems at the local level.
Right, you got to start small.
You got to start small, and I think if we're out for healthy, sort of global community, we got to start small on that as well, and build out from it.
I think too. I think Chrissy kind of talked a little bit about it, and I think you did too, Hans. That I think it's easy to aim all our efforts at the general population, where we're going to get the biggest buck or the biggest bang for our buck. But I think the same goes with taking land and preserving it, and preserving it for the most widely accepted use. And I think that, definitely as of the last few years that I've been here, I feel like we've explored those community members that don't represent, the majority. Like Chrissy said, how do we get people out on the trail that have difficulty with accessibility? And what do we do with land that, we don't necessarily want to open up to, public access and trails the way we have everything? What are the other options? And I feel like, I can't speak for other conservation organizations, but I feel like we're definitely, taking a look at that, and that's part of our regular conversation of, how we can take this land and make it the best that it is, without necessarily making it the best thing for the largest majority.
Right.
It's interesting, just thinking of changing values and people not being attached to the land in the way that they were. Sometimes I feel like as an organization, we are learning. I know as a steward working on stewardship, like, we are learning kind of how to reconnect with the land, or trying to learn better ways to connect with the land. And then I think taking that to the larger community and trying to bring other people with us to on whatever level that is. If it's, for some people it is hiking on the trail. For some people it might be, learning more about managing blueberries in a different way, or managing the forest, or learning about, medicinal herbs, or whatever it is. I just, like, we individually, I think all of us, at least as far as I know, we didn't come from a place of being really, like, I didn't grow up knowing how to be with the land, and I've tried in my adult life to relearn some of these things, but it's hard, and it is a community process. So I think it's like, the community coming together, us maybe taking the reins and leading some of it, but like really trying to relearn on a variety of different ways how to interact with this environment. And especially like I I feel like this is my home. I still feel like somewhat, like a guest here, like I'm not from here. But learning this environment and then learning how to bring the community with us as we sort of all figure out what it means to be like, what does it mean to be living here in a way that's not, we're not going to go back in time 200 years and all of us be living, off the land entirely, but how do we bring that into the modern time and like live in a respectful, responsible way in this place, and like bring the community with us to do that, and like learn these values and recognize them in whatever form that comes in for different people and their access and all that sort of thing. So I do feel like I'm learning those things as after working here for a couple of years, especially coming from a forest management background where it's all about like you learn the traditional ways of traditional whatever, I guess, ways of managing a forest. That's very much like directing the forest where you want it to go, versus I'm trying to learn ways to like work with the forest to where it's going to go in a way that could also benefit the community. And bringing all of that along, it's been a really interesting learning process for me as a resource manager, and then to see how the community responds to that, and to see how everyone here what everyone brings to the table, and what we're all learning from each other.
I think in a lot of cases, we're learning those things from individuals within the community too, which is really great, because these are people who know this place, love this place, and have a really like deep relationship with this place in whatever way it makes sense to them. And so bringing in all these voices from the community, whether it's a farmer, whether it's an herbalist, whether it's an indigenous voice, somebody who's deeply connected to the fisheries. There's so much that we can learn from one another, and I think our work is providing a little bit of a like canvas for that.
It's like a platform for those voices who probably maybe are not, in modern culture, they're not the ones that are the loud ones. They don't have that place to.
Really good educational experiences in my experience are educational in both directions, right? The best classes I've ever taught were the ones where I learned stuff from my students at the same time that I was teaching. And I feel like we're doing the same thing, because we're not inventing anything brand new here. We're sort of reinterpreting, rediscovering things that other people have known before us, and having a conversation within the community, and also having that conversation with the land too. Like, okay, I'm going to try this. What's the answer to that question, and see what happens. I think also expanding out a conceptualization of community that holds the land within that word. That land and community are not necessarily two different things. They are, in fact, the same thing. Two different aspects of the same thing. And that when you're looking for human advantage out of something on the land, you by necessity have to be looking for, okay, what's the advantage for all the other non-human parts of this community, essentially, and how do we manage for the best, for the best for the most. And I think that's a change in the land trust world. And it's not that we're doing it all it's happening in a number of different places, but it's not just about buying and holding property. It's about buying property and then building relationship with it. And because we will not conserve, as Blue Hill Heritage Trust, all of the land that needs to be cared for on this peninsula. It has to be done by other people, on their own property as well. And if we can be a clearinghouse for that sort of community growth and community education, as well as protecting some land, to me that's our highest and best
and
purpose.
Hearing from the community, what do they want to know?
Right.
What are their questions about their land, is so valuable and helps inform what we do here. Just listening is a huge part of it. And I really like the forward thinking nature too. Not like we're not really looking back on what we've done. We're always like, okay, we've done a project, that was great. Let's keep like what's in the future. Let's keep looking out. And I think that that's really important to think about those sort of long-term things. And like we're doing some of that work now with a strategic plan and with looking at the peninsula and trying to figure out like where are those places with the development pressures that are coming. We're not trying to stop development, but we're trying to help sort of shape how it happens and protect the places that are super important for the ecosystem, the community, climate change resiliency. And that's pretty forward-thinking stuff. And we're not doing it in a vacuum. Like we're trying to talk about it and help take people, like Sandy said, along with us for that ride and include them in that discussion. And I think that that's such important work. And as we work with these kids in schools and in our 4-H club and whatever, like some of those kids that I worked with who were little kids are now seniors in high school or have just gone off to college, and they're now like voting decision makers in the community. And you just hope that maybe some of the engagement we had with them made an impact on how they think about their environment, their community, their ecosystem, and help inform their decisions in life and what they want to do. And that's a part of the forward thinking too, sort of preparing the next generation and arming them with knowledge to.
Yeah.
And it's really hopeful. Admittedly, working in environmental conservation and it's a lot of hopelessness a lot of the time, or it's a lot of there's such huge problems that like if I think about them too hard, it's hard to function, and it's hard to think what could I ever do to address these gigantic issues that are affecting the whole world. And this organization is a really hopeful, forward-thinking, like, okay, there's problems, but we have a plan and we're going to do what we can do, and we're not going to lose hope, and we're going to go forward and like make the best for this local area with hopefully influencing larger areas outside of that. And so that really, having an outlet for that kind of like, okay, there is good work that we can do, and like we can get here every day at work and we can do this good work that seems like it's making a difference, and it's actually it's full of hope. And that really inspires me here, because it's there are daunting problems of the world that this organization to me makes it seem like, okay, no, but we can address some of them.
Yeah, something else that just occurred to me, which seems a little pedantic maybe, but I think it's important to, in terms of young people's engagement with this organization. We're teaching them, we're working with them and imparting knowledge and skills. I think something else that this organization does really well is demonstrates professionalism within this work that we do. Like, oh, this is something I can do. Right. I can not only
a career path.
This is a career path, and I think that's important for engaging young people too.
And lots of varied things you can do working within this work.
Right.
You don't always have to be, a wildlife biologist or
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the kids or the interns, let's say, that we bring into our lives here, even if they don't go on to conservation or something environmental, they'll have that knowledge, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember back in the day when I did this. We should probably do this in our own backyard, or maybe I should give money to organizations that are still keeping that glimmer of hope and that property, alive. And it's comforting to know that the small community that we are living in now, that we have such a chance to influence that bubble more and more and more outside. So
and unfortunately we're missing Lander's voice here this morning, because this is where her work plugs into what we're doing here at the Trust as well, and working with little kids, but also increasingly with older kids in that.
And teachers.
And teachers too, that's
really
right.
helping to create a shift in the way that, schools are running, and to not just bring nature into the classroom, but to bring the classroom out into nature and let the kids just explore and be and find their own connections with that place and to build a relationship with it and care about it. And that's what's so exciting about Lander's programming, is these kids care. they go out and they see a tree is tipped over and they're like, "God, it's Fred the tree," and like we have to save the tree, and you just hope that they're going to carry that with them as they grow up. It's really wonderful.
And we should probably say here that since people are going to be watching this, Lander's fine. She's
yeah.
on maternity leave.
She wants to have a baby. She's good.
Yeah. I mean, to speak to what Sandy was just saying about hope and hopelessness, and I mean, this can be kind of a bleak field when you think about some of the realities of our environment and our climate. But I feel like, especially in the last, year and a half during the pandemic, working here gave me so much purpose, and I think really like mentally helped me get through the pandemic without really being emotionally scarred. I know some people who had such a hard time, and it was such a scary time, and this was such a great distraction, our work, because we saw the fruits of our labor providing like emotional and like physical health supports to the community and at large. People just migrating here during the pandemic to their their seasonal residences, and local families who live next to trails for 10-15 years and have never gone on them all of a sudden are on them once a day, because they're remote learning at home and they need a break and they need to get outside. And just the flood of photos and emails and just messages of gratitude from the community, it just made me feel like this work is so important on so many levels. And we were here like at a time that we never anticipated would happen, but we were here for them. And it was like, I mean, I won't say it was accidental, but it certainly wasn't. We didn't plan for a pandemic and have all these trails.
Right.
But what an amazing, fortunate circumstance that these trails were here, and that we had staff like Lander who could just immediately create virtual programming for school kids and for the community. We had a woman come in the other day with fresh, warm brownies, and she's from Vermont, but she was here, and she said, "I wanted to bring in these brownies, and I just wanted to say thank you because your organization absolutely saved my sanity over the pandemic. The webinar series, and whenever I could get up to Maine, your trails absolutely saved my sanity. I don't know what I would have done without you." And that's so meaningful to hear that stuff.
We've empowered so many people, not only during the pandemic, but prior to that, and I think moving forward. I mean, not only through encouraging people to take their own mental and physical health into their own hands by getting out on the trails. We've empowered teachers to learn new and creative ways to engage their students. We've empowered students to, get out, and families to get out to spend time together. I mean, I really feel like if there's one thing that we, really do well, is that we kind of empower people to take the opportunity to look at their environment and see what it can do. And Foxy obviously agrees with me.
Yes.
I can.
Yeah, the pandemic was seeds that were planted 35 years ago bore fruit this last year, and it was really interesting to watch how it progressed. Not only trail use, but as you said, the ability to shift and start doing things in virtual reality that we had never really thought about before. And that happened because technology existed. It also happened because Lander and other people on the staff were dedicated enough to this peninsula and this community that they took the time to figure out how that was going to work.
Well, that the organization had taken the time and had the foresight to hire someone whose sole purpose was education and outreach, who could have that,
Yeah.
like if this had happened 5 years ago and it was a much smaller staff with a much, more narrow focus of the organization, it would have been far harder to
Yeah.
provide the resources that we did,
Yeah.
that Lander did for the community.
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
certainly couldn't have done it 5 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, one, technology wasn't up to speed at that time, and then two, we just didn't have the bandwidth
Yeah.
to really do that,
Yeah.
or the knowledge.
Yeah.
So, certainly the pandemic, we had challenges just for the capacity issues on the trails,
Right.
let alone the capacity issues on Zoom or whatever,
Yeah.
dealing with that. But it's it's a problem that we're happy that we had, I guess.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
it did. It gave purpose to to a kind of a purposeless time
Yeah.
for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And it felt good. It felt, yeah.
And it definitely opened up our eyes to the potential that we have to engage people who are not necessarily right here on the peninsula right
Yeah.
now. I mean, on numerous occasions, we had people who were in attendance for online events that were out of the state or out of the region or out of the country, and able to participate in real time with us. We were able to connect, adult learners in the Czech Republic with people here on the peninsula because they happen to be doing similar work, and those are connections that, it's not that they wouldn't have ever been made before, but they were certainly made easier by the situation, by the technology. And moving forward, I know we've talked about it, but, now the question is, how do we continue to engage those people using this technology? Because as much as the technology is frustrating at times, it's also just this resource that I don't ever see us going back to the way it was before.
No, we won't, because that was the big learning experience for me over the pandemic, was the geographic range of people that we brought in, but also the fact that there's a huge number of people out there who, whether it's because of time constraints or physical constraints, couldn't take advantage of what we were doing before.
Right.
There's something to be said for joining in on an event and being home in your pajamas on your couch with a cup of coffee.
Right. Right. And even if you're just watching a recording of it,
Right.
Yes.
it is a way to engage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of the next step in our learning curve, is figuring out how to bring back the things that we were doing before that we don't want to give up, in terms of out in the woods and the in-person and that, but also to continue to offer this stuff to a wider audience.
Yeah.
And
There were many silver linings, I think, to this last year, that I think, like, we wouldn't have ever been brave enough or wanted to try these things were we not forced to. And along those same lines, I feel like the voices that we were able to invite into our community to share their knowledge, to share their relationship with the land, their expertise, we were able to really broaden that and invite some more underrepresented voices in, which was really exciting to be able to do here in an area like Maine, to talk about issues of, what is it like to be a person of color out in nature, or, what are some indigenous ways of having a relationship with the land, that it's not always as easy to hold those events here in a place like Maine. But we were able to do it and invite those voices in, which were really exciting and important to do, and to collaborate with another land trust, on a webinar series, and to show the community this sort of commitment with other neighboring land trusts. And there was a lot of really good stuff that came out of it, because I think we have always fostered that. We've always fostered that idea about encouraging hearing more voices and collaboration, and really thinking about what does community mean, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean. And so we've been talking about it, and it's a big part of our vision and just our whole philosophy of how we do our work. So when something like a pandemic came along, it seemed easy for Lander and the staff to make those shifts and do that, and then to recognize the value in it. And so I think that speaks a lot to sort of the forward-thinking nature of the organization as well, which it's really nice to work at an organization where stuff like that happens. It feels good. Like, it genuinely just feels good and important to be doing that sort of stuff. So,
Well, kudos to you for setting up the StoryCorps stuff. I really enjoyed that. We've always been good at documenting the written history of our properties and how we went about everything. But to put that to visual and audio and seeing the players,
yeah.
That made everything happen for some of our special properties was just incredible.
Yeah, the Story of Place has been a cool learning series. I'm learning a lot about these projects that happened way before me, and that's been really fun.
And that's a good segue into the other thing that struck me about the pandemic, and the lesson that I've learned is that this organization started out as a land protection organization, and that remains incredibly important work. It gave me impetus to really think harder about what future projects look like. It added emphasis to the need that, even though we have protected a lot of land on this peninsula, there's more work to be done. As we see, as we welcome people onto the peninsula, people are coming, and that's great. They're bringing families and ideas, and it's all good. But we have work to do in terms of land conservation as well.
That's the flip side of the coin of all the community benefits from having sort of an influx of new folks,
right,
and appreciating this land, but then also dealing with the fact that means a lot more pressure on the resources here, and how does the community deal with that, and how do we, as an organization, prioritize what properties are really important ecologically and from a community perspective, and being really thoughtful with how we go about. Obviously it's difficult to purchase land and to protect land, and it's a finite resources available to do that, and we have to be really thoughtful going forward with how those resources are used and what that looks like.
We're responsible for a significant community asset in our land right now, and we want to be responsible for more of that. And the more land we hold, the more community has to be part of the organization.
Right. And just to think, 5-6 years ago, we were, our two big focuses were recreational trails and wildlife habitat. And those two things, even though they are a large component of community, look at what we've added in the last 5 years and our focus, and working landscapes, outreach. It's incredible, just the growth that we have seen just in those 5 to 6 years.
It is. It's significant, and it's. We aren't the only land trust out there doing innovative work, but we are one of the land trusts out there doing innovative work like this, and that feels good as well. It's what you just said, George, has its roots in a building full of people who come to work every day, engaged in what they're doing, passionate in different ways about different parts of this organization, willing not only to commit energy but intellectual capital into making this place better. Maybe that's the key to success for the
Have a good team.
Yeah.
It's exciting to go to work and be genuinely glad to see the people every day that you see, and to feel that connection and that we're all part of this work together. And I love the collaborative spirit of the way we do our work. We're always talking and brainstorming and working together in different groups, and You know, we're all coming out and standing around Beth's desk, interrupting her work to have a big mass conversation. But it's great because we all just sort of get to know what the other person is doing and feel like we're a part of it, and like our voice is valuable in it, and we can come to each other for advice and feedback, and it feels really good to work at a place with that energy.
The biggest bummer about the pandemic was when, you know, that's 10 weeks when the office was closed.
Right.
That was,
That disconnect.
Yeah.
And it's always amazing to me. There's so many moving parts to this organization. The Blue Jays are horning in, but that, you know, especially, I mean, even since I've been here, it's become a more complicated organization, and we're sort of branched out in many different ways. And everybody's got a lot of different responsibilities and like very disparate responsibilities, and yet, in partly because we communicate so well, like stuff happens and like dots get connected and like balls keep moving, and like somehow with this complex flow of things going on, like, yeah, we drop a ball every now and again, but for the most part, like all of these things just happen and keep moving, and like I can trust that if I'm like, hey Chrissy, can you do this? I need you to do this so I can finish this, like it gets done, and like stuff happens and moves, and like projects somehow miraculously get completed, you know, and it always kind of amazes me because we all have so much going on, but we're good about, you know, working together and accomplishing stuff, and it happens, and it's always really, it's wonderful to be able to like trust each other, rely on each other,
have each other's
communicate
back.
so well.
Anything else?
Other thoughts? I think that was kind of what I was looking for in this conversation.
No?
Yeah.
It was nice. I miss Lander.
Yeah, I know.
I wish Lander was here.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's the nicest of all of us.
She by far.
Yeah.
By far.
Right.
She pulls our like nice quick quote, like right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice.
Good talk.
Good talk, Russ. Good talk.
I don't know what.
You don't know that movie reference. Okay.
Dating yourself.
My name's not Russ.
That's a
National Lampoon
yes, thank
Vacation.
you.